Hello friends, I am Chevee. Welcome to my shed. How are you today? How's life in your world? How's things where you are? I hope it's all good and great and wonderful. Today I have another book to introduce to you or to talk to you about, or maybe even encourage you to pick up on your own. The difference is I haven't read this book yet. I have read the first few chapters of the book. But I can absolutely 100% recommend this book, because I can absolutely 100% recommend the source material that this book has been taken from or inspired, right? And that is a podcast that I listen to called Ear Hustle. And this book is called This Is Ear Hustle. This book was written by the co-hosts of the podcast, Nigel Poor and Earlonne Woods. And if you have never heard of Ear Hustle, it is probably my favorite podcast I've ever listened to. It is based, it began in and is based around the lives of incarcerated individuals in San Quentin Prison in the California prison system. And this book started not this book, the podcast started kind of by accident in the San Quentin Media Lab. And Nigel Poor is a photography professor. She's a visual artist. She was volunteering there, and she started kind of working on some sort of audio type thing inside San Quentin where they would play it, or they would interview people and play it. And a man there named Earlonne was always around, always available whenever she needed help, and the two of them started this podcast. And the podcast is phenomenal. As someone born with white male privilege, I very, very much enjoy learning things through a perspective that I've never experienced before. And Ear Hustle allows me to understand the heart and soul and mind of incarcerated individuals. And it humanizes something that I feel that Hollywood and television and major media has dehumanized, has criminalized, like these incarcerated people. They've villainized them. And while, yeah, there are bad people in prison, there's a lot of bad people in prison, there's also a lot of humans in prison. And even those humans that did bad things in the past still deserve a chance to be human. And I think that Ear Hustle brings humanity to something that the rest of us, those privileged of us who have never had to experience incarceration or have family members who experience incarceration, it opens the door and says, listen, these are still people, because they're locked up and away from society behind bars, behind walls, and you can't see into their daily lives. They're still people living daily lives, just in a very different setting. And Ear Hustle does an amazing job at shedding a light on that and taking some of the stigma out of it. I don't know that prison will always have a stigma because it's where the bad people go, but I think that we over-villainize the people that are in those prisons. And I think that both Ear Hustle and this book do a really great job of kind of, lifting the veil a little bit and saying, look, people live here, right? Yes, criminals live here, but people live here. I've read the first couple of chapters. The first chapter is written by the host Earlonne Woods, who was incarcerated. His initial sentence was, I think, like 32 or 36 years to life for under California's 3 strikes law for an assault charge. And when you read his story and you read the world that he grew up in, he's only a few years older than me, right? He's like, I think he just turned 50 this year. He grew up in LA in the 80s, 70s and 80s, when it was a really bad time to grow up in LA, right? Like that was, the Crips and the Bloods were in town, and crack cocaine started to be huge in the early 80s. And Earlonne was thrown into all of that, right? And it wasn't his choice, and it's just how things were. And reading his story, reading about this young boy, like when his trouble started, he was a child, and he was living a world that is so foreign to me that it I cried. I literally cried reading this man's story. It's so heartbreaking to know that here in America, people live in just absolute horrific conditions, and they don't even know that something's wrong. You know, Erlon played Erlon played gang like me and my white friends played cowboys and Indians, right? Like to him and his friends at 8, 9, 10 years old were playing gang. They started their own gang. And to them, it was just kids being kids, kids having fun. But gang is what they knew, and gang is what they grew up into. And it really sucks that it happened, right? But I think Erlon also lets you see that he is a. I think Nigel calls him a softie a lot, and I think a lot of that comes through in his story, that he really was doing these things not because that's what he wanted to do, but it's because what he knew, and it just kind of happened. It just kind of fell into place. Like when people start showing up with thousands of dollars in their pocket, and you look at that and go, how do I get that? It is what it is, right? Juxtapose that with Nigel, who is a little older than Erlon. She's a white female from New England. She's, grew up with, maybe not privilege. I don't really know how much privilege Nigel grew up with. She hasn't really shared that information, but she grew up with the understanding that she could be whatever she wanted to be. Like, nobody told her that she had to be in a gang. Nobody told her that she had to be anything than what she wanted to be. And all she ever wanted to be was an artist. And that's what she did. And she was given that agency to make that decision at an early age. And it worked out, right? And so you have these two hosts that are polar opposites in so many different ways. And they really put a lot of love into this product, both the book and the show. And they really are great interviewers. They ask really wonderful questions. You can often hear the sympathy in their voices. You can hear humanity through their interviews, both from them and from the individuals that they interview. It's a really, really wonderful creation. And I'm really excited. This book just came out yesterday. I got it in the mail from when I pre-ordered it months ago. And I'm excited to read the stories that are here. I think some of them have been in the show. Some of them are new. And I think I've always looked for perspectives that I don't understand because I haven't lived them. And this is one that it's so many stories through this podcast have made me really stop and analyze my life and how I grew up and my privilege, right? And it has really made me think long and hard about the sufferings that others not like me. Erlon Woods, black man in LA. Nigel Poor, a female who has had her own demons, right? The demons that, unfortunately, females, it seems like all of them face, right? Two people like that can let me into their world and show me something that I never considered before. And they can do it in such an engaging and thoughtful way that it becomes engrossing. Go check it out. Check out the podcast. Check out the book. I'm really, really, really thankful for it, truthfully. I like perspective. So that's what I have for you today. Thank you for being here as always. Thank you for liking, commenting, subscribing, being amazing friends and wonderful people. I really appreciate you. And I'll see you again tomorrow. Today's word you should know to sound smart is implicit. It is an adjective meaning something that is understood or implied but not stated directly. The vanity of men, a constant insult to women, is also the ground for the implicit feminine claim of superior sensitivity and morality. Patricia Myers-Spax, an American literary critic. Implicit, I-M-P-L-I-C-I-T. Interestingly enough, I think, doesn't implicit have like a criminal or at least a legal definition that is different from understood or implied but not stated. Like, I thought that my interpretation of implicit was always like obviously fact.